Welcome to the second part of this webinar. As we discussed last week, performance gaps travel in packs. Their causes are typically multiple and they interact too. That means OPWL practitioners need to create blended systems comprised of interacting components that close the performance gaps. We're really looking forward to the case study that Daniela and John will share with us today.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would say welcome again. It's Blended Solution Part 2, series of webinars. John, for the ones that have not attended the first session, a quick refresher of what we have discussed in the first one. John set up the stage by introducing concepts and approaches. I will list only 3 of them that I would build on. The first one is about blended solutions. And when we say blended solution, this means that includes 2 or more simultaneous, integrated, interdependent, synergistic interventions. They address the same root cause redundantly. They align multiple stakeholders, require both qualitative and quantitative measures to design effectiveness, and require faith, courage, and stretch. It's a mouthful of everything, but you'll see how those would be showcased in a real example. The second concept that I wanted to refresh your memory, it's about Erica Gilmore's PhD research and finding. And she has found that in average, for every 3 categories identified as issues, root causes in a performance environment situation, there are interventions developed in at least 4 categories to affect the desired change. A very important aspect, as again you'll see, there is no one-to-one parity here. And the third component that John has alluded in his presentation was aligning the blended solution to the human performance model. And he showed 2 examples. One example, a personal one for the ones that attended last week. It was his summer trip or winter trip to Miami, and how that was mapped in a performance model. And the other one was the Rotman MBA students in Canada. So these were the three topics that I would build on, and let's start. Okay, so again, it's us, John and I. Today, we'll use a scaffolding approach really to go through the session, because we think that layering the concepts one after the other would really support the build of knowledge that we want to convey and transfer today. So we'll start by setting the context of the initiative, key concepts about that, how we looked at the blended solution, what approaches we took for that, and lessons learned. So today we also want to be sure that you would be able to learn few things and also have tools to apply as you go forward. So from learning perspective, you will see how we map the blended solution to the HPT model, what tools and methodologies we have used, align them to the organizational context, which is important, align knowledge management approaches to technology and business. And of course, organization needs. Technology is not everything in those initiatives. It is an enabler, and then how we really look at that. Approach different engagement intervention with stakeholders during proposal, project, and operations. Select a set of interventions, what you'll have the tools to select a set of interventions to form a blended solution that would be accepted and successful when implemented. Setting the context. So about the organization, Albertile Services and collaborative sites is the initiative that I'm going to talk about. So it's really the Alberta services went through a major transformation 10 years ago. We have 10 years since we really went through an amalgamation of multiple geographical areas into the first and largest province-wide healthcare, fully integrated healthcare system, looking for more of 4.3 million people living in Alberta and the other provinces around. It's important to highlight the fact that there are more than 100,000 employees, volunteers, and also 11,000 physicians. Of course, it's also important the fact that you have multiple acute care hospitals, beds, and facilities throughout the province. The picture that you have here is really the Alberta Children's Hospital, and you see it colorful. It's really what the choice of design that kids have selected. So I think this is also an example of and user-driven design, which sometimes is very important when you look at any type of initiatives, construction or initiatives that would require digital integration. So what did we learn from this before going further? I would want to invite you to really, more of a temperature check to let me know what your status is. So we know like this, in Alberta services, we have a huge size of the organization, geographically dispersed. We have a workforce that is more healthcare oriented, with different capacity and learning of technology. And we also know that everywhere in the world we are bombarded by information. And I think everybody feels that challenge in their day-to-day work. So what I'd like to hear from you before I go further is, what do you think that in your day-to-day work takes longer? Search for information, posting information, what else? Finding information, analyzing it. So if you want to add in the instant message, what takes you most? Publishing, sharing, or posting, sharing, searching, or analyzing information. That would help us in having a benchmark from your real world as well. And we build on that too.
Daniela, this is John. Say again what the categories are that you want them to consider when they're going. Which one takes the most information, the most time?
It's posting, sharing, searching, analyzing.
Posting, sharing,
searching, and analyzing.
Searching. Got it. Posting, sharing, searching, analyzing. Okay. And Steve is saying searching for, interpreting, analyzing once I find it. Others? Search from Victor, searching, and the filtering and vetting information. From Rick, I would say analyzing. For me, oftentimes it's searching. Who else?
So, do we have more? John coming in?
So analyzing from Rachel, she would add a category of correcting what was entered due to incorrect or incomplete information received. Fair enough. And it sounds like that's a heavy hitter for her in terms of the amount of time spent.
Okay, so I would share now what International Data Corporation found when they've done a study with more than 500 companies. They determined that it costs, so search is really the highest number in all of this, and it costs $14,000 per year per employee of time lost in only searching for information. And all of the components that I mentioned before, so posting, sharing, searching, and analyzing, if the information is not well organized, costs $50,000 US per year per employee. So looking at Alberta's services and the size and all the other attributes that I have mentioned before, we really had to look at what the performance gap is, as we united from so many areas. And we definitely have an organizational need for information and knowledge management, easy find and search of information and knowledge, and effective and efficient business processes as a result of that. So what we were tasked to do as a team was to optimize the use of technology and improve information and knowledge flow to increase efficiency and effectiveness for business processes. So here is where we started the journey. We had to really look at the technology that we had, the sites that were built, the way the information was flowing, the pain points that the users had, and through the journey that we have done, really to look at how after this journey the new development of the site would look like. So we had SharePoint of technology, we had Tableau from analytics perspective. So we had to look at how we integrate everything to be able to respond to the user needs and their pain points. So collaborative sites is really the name of the initiative. It was a project, of course, before. When it was ready, it was implemented in operation. We are now in post-implementation mode. So we are really looking at the entire journey and the tools that we have applied for that. So we had 1 year to really demonstrate what the current technology can do. We had to build it from the perspective of having it as an operational platform, respond to business needs for access, engage, collaborate, manage, and monitor activities as they were identified by stakeholders. The pre-project started in 2015. The important part was to agree on pain points with the stakeholder, build that informal support with leaders, conduct research and environmental scan. In the next year, once all this pre-project work was done, we were ready to start the project by creating a structure, a steering team. The first cross-functional team of that nature, you'll see the structure in a bit, decide on the project approach, design to be rates and user-driven, and be able to respond to reporting needs, and of course, never forget evaluation, because that was our feedback loop for continuous improvement. So in 1 year, we went through 16 prototypes that we have developed, and once approved, we're ready to implement operations. We are in implementation mode now. Of course, you had to look at training. We created a new cadre of business stewards, which are super users. We developed education and training resources, support model, service model, and feedback loop for the users to inform us about what else they would need. In the post-implementation, where we are currently, we refined the different feedback that we received from users, and mainly business rules, because technology cannot really cover everything that the users would need. So it needs to put some or frequently asked questions, if you want, of how to deal with different aspects. and also respond to specific business needs. Every area had a particular need that we had to add on top of the current sites.
Daniela,
Yes,
can you go back to the previous slide, please?
yes.
There was a question from Victor in terms of, given that there was a period of time when there were a number, more than a dozen prototypes that you were dealing with. You said 16?
Yes.
And the question was, how were they evaluated and evaluated simultaneously?
We had an agile project management approach, and we developed at every stage in the agile a component of the prototype. So at the end, when we counted all of them, we went through so many iterations until it was finalized. So we've done conference room pilots with users to test the prototype. At the end of every iteration, we responded, and then we looked back with the feedback. So it was kind of 4x4. We had, and I have an example of how the agile project looked like, the wheel with the phases.
Super.
Any other question about this? Okay. So so that was the project, and then we now we looked at how we align it to the simplified human performance technology model. And as John presented previously, we did the same thing with this particular implementation or initiative that we had. So from organizational perspective, we know that we had information and knowledge management need. From actual performance, we knew that it's difficult to find and search for information. From where we wanted to be, we wanted to have easy find and search for information. And how you get there is through solutions, so interventions, and aligning different domains of complexity in that is change management, performance management, and knowledge management. And all of these really supported the build of blended solutions. Evaluation, of course, was ongoing during and the end of the project and after implementation.
Daniela?
Yes.
I have a question for you. In the right-hand side where you're talking about the interventions, were you making different multiple business cases year over year to continue the work, continue the funding, continue the continuity? How did that happen?
The business case was done initially when we started the project with, and in our case was a project charter that had to be signed by the sponsors, by all the ones that would have accountability for the initiative. As we were finalizing the project phase, we went into operations with a service level agreement, which was really telling us what we can do, how we can improve, who is doing what. So a clearly defined service level agreement with accountable, responsible, and who is going to implement those type of changes. So that's from structure perspective of the different layers of, we call it here business case as a generic, but as we went through the initiative, we had different names for it.
So that issue of charter at the high level and then service level agreements is oftentimes a way that organizations deal with projects or multi-year projects to get the kind of buy-in that's needed. Did you find in the course of this project, Daniela, that you had any challenges that were associated with particular people who may have been charter sponsors or service level agreement sponsors leaving? So the role might have been there, but the person who was the person signing off, they moved on.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think we were kind of fortunate this didn't happen, but it's also the fact that the project itself was 1 year project, which didn't give too much of a chance for the ones that that were involved from sponsorship perspective to, you know, it didn't happen, so they didn't leave, right? But I think it's after, probably in the transition part, where it was a change in the management of IT, that we had to kind of bring up to speed the IT manager on what we were doing, and I think that's sometimes difficult from knowledge transfer perspective. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Steve asked, what were the high points of the cause analysis? I'm thinking then there may be some significant environmental factors at play.
True. So I think what is important is that we have done the needs analysis before everything started. So I'll go back one slide. We didn't jump into the project before we have done this research and environmental scan, which was looking at best practice organizations that implemented similar initiatives. And we looked at the strategies they approached, and also tools and methodologies. And we looked at NASA, Accenture, Kraft, Lloyd's, and US Defense. And yeah, I think there is another one that escapes me, but we had a core set of best practice organizations that that we studied from all these perspectives, and of course the internal environmental scan and the conditions that we had from technology perspective.
Thank you.
So we advance now to the blended solution approach. So we went through what the performance gap was, where we wanted to get, the different approaches of how we looked from performance technology perspective, and now really how did we move from point zero to the implementation. So we looked at intersection of domains, things that we knew we have to change from people perspective, from performance perspective for efficiency, and also knowledge management from knowledge transfer, from how information and knowledge flows, and so on.
Before you go any further, go back one slide. I'm just recalling conversations that you and I have had. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was also a fourth domain that we're not talking about today, that if I recall correctly had to do with talent management. Am I recalling that, or am I conflating that with something else?
Oh no, it's true. So I think there are other two areas that we explored, but it's the talent management component through building competencies to the super users, the business stewards, as we have called them, and so that is one of them. So talent management, and also content management, because it's it's really how we look at the content that is stored in this platform and how we make it available, what is critical relevant for the business to really show in the searches, so people don't have multiple ways to filter it to find what they need very quickly. So there are definitely more domains. It's just I limited this particular one to 3 domains.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, John. A very good point, though. So what did we look at these free domains? We looked at from change management is helping users understand the benefits of what we are trying to do, what the template value is. As you have your bank application, anytime you open it, you see the same hyperlinks in the same place. It's just that sometimes you use all of them, sometimes not. The same concepts here, we try to apply commonly across all the areas that were involved in the design. Be able to facilitate the individual adoption, and you'll see the models that we use, manage resistance, design communication and training programs to support. And very important, implement incentive strategies. And these come in the form of badges, recognition that comes from the contribution they have to the content in the platform and the social media elements. From performance management, we really look at aligning with performance improvement standards that you are probably all aware with. There are 10. And from knowledge management is really looking at introducing proven and emerging approaches. And just to list a few, proven, we mean that lessons learned, knowledge bases, knowledge cafes, communities of practice, you all heard about them as tools really to support ideation and efficiency from the business perspective. And emerging are the new tools that are coming, like news feeds, blog, analytics, activity dashboards that would really be new tools to support the knowledge flow and showcase it. And we also look at the sustainability of what blended solution means when we look at all these domains. And we definitely needed to consider the challenges that we had along the way from strategic perspective, project team, which was the cross-functional one, and the knowledge worker perspective. So they were all at different levels as we started the journey. Okay, a little bit about the structure now of the project. We are in the project structure now. If you remember, it was the pre-project, the project structure. We had the steering team. We involved 11 business areas. The project team was the first of its kind in our organization, where we had IT, identity access, web communication, and knowledge management. And we were definitely in the storming mode when we started. And we had to go through all the levels of change there. And the sponsor was knowledge management. From the project approach, we used the agile methodology. And here for our colleague that asked the question, we went through 4 iterations. And after every iteration, we had a conference room pilot. And as I mentioned, we did check with the users about their feedback. We collected it, we implemented, and sent it again for their review. At the end, we had a sign-off of the prototype, and that's what we used to implement and release to users. And important, as you have seen, communication was along the way an important part of our process. I'll go back a little bit. I was talking about end user driven design. It's important that I mentioned this again. When we build a user interface, we did that with their input. But the other part, how did we decide to really divide in 4 iterations? I think that's probably something important when we have a mega project. All these areas that you have seen in the steering team were interviewed, and we had asked them to provide scenarios of their day-to-day work. And we analyzed all those interviews, and that's how we ended up with 4 components of core activities that they are doing. And they were related to the search, which is the user interface and how it looks. They all have projects and initiatives. They all work on documents, and they need the engagement tools. So that's how we divided the sprints from agile perspective. So implemented, we were ready to implement, but we really need to look at different permutations and selection of interventions to really go through the different layers of implementation, post-implementation. An example of how we did that was, and we implemented in 19 departments within the organization. There are currently around 57,000 users that access the platform. We divided the domains of complexity, if you remember from the previous slide, in change management, knowledge management, and performance. The way we have looked at this was, what are the performance gaps that we noticed? What are the potential root causes, and what corrective actions we can take? And then what you see here with yellow, we did select the ones that were more acute in that particular phase of the project. So for example, performance gap, employees worry that are not equipped to be successful in the change, insufficient time for learning. Then we had really to look at micro-learning and build a knowledge base for findability and so on. So that's the thinking. So you do select this based on where you are in the project, and this was a continuous type of list that we would use. From knowledge management, of course, it's difficult to use new tools. It's always reverting back to your current processes. What did you need to do for that? That was another potential intervention. Performance management. We tend to keep the information for us, what that means from root cause and what type of interventions you can have to support that. So this gives you an example of how we break down the performance gaps, the root causes, the corrective interventions, but which ones do we pick? Which ones do we pick based on the need in that particular moment? That's when we use the effort benefit matrix, and we aligned the different interventions in here, looking at the benefit that would bring and the effort that would take. And that's how you would select which ones would go in that batch of blended solutions, because you had to go with better set of blended solutions across the continuum of the initiative.
Daniela, I have a question from Steve. Can you tell us more about how you used Agile on this large-scale project? In smaller projects, an Agile sprint creates a completed minimum viable product. Did you complete a set of sprints for different system components?
Correct. So I'm going back to that one.
Yeah.
So yes, exactly. So it was a minimum viable product every time we had an iteration. So we had the frame of what we wanted to do. So we responded to the user needs from, this is how the interface should look like. But they were active only the buttons that were leading you for that particular topic. So for example, first time we built the engagement tools in this particular case, user interface and access. Then we built the process for the projects. So it was this approach that we took. So you had an accepted product for every part of the bigger product.
Oh, I don't know that.
So
Great. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so that was the benefit matrix, and I would probably stop here for a bit of check with the ones that are online about their thoughts. Did you have initiatives that were complex, and do you think this would be a helpful approach to sort through many interventions that you would have? Anything that you'd like to share?
So I'll read stuff and I'll ask if people want to talk, and if so, they can unmute. So let's see what comes in the chat. And then I will have a question after we handle this. Okay?
Okay.
Matter of fact, while I'm waiting, let me ask my question.
Yes.
Since a blended solution is an integrated, synergistic, simultaneous, interdependent set of interventions, who did you pull together to look at creating this set of identified interventions as a blended solution? And what kinds of conversations were you having so in fact it was integrated and interdependent and synergistic?
No, that's definitely a very good question, John. I think we have built, I'll go back into the slide. We built through our work together with these very important business areas from our organization, a relationship of input and feedback and contribution to improvement and optimization of the platform from usage perspective and from functionality perspective. So we actually built a network, and they were all the time involved in those changes, and the people that we did work with from training perspective, the super users. So they were the conduit between us and their areas to support any type of change that was needed.
Okay. Thank you. Rachel had a question for you, Daniela. Did you find it to be an issue that when you asked them to give a description of work scenarios, there was a discrepancy between them giving you what should be done versus what is actually done? And if so, did this create a problem in the creation of prototypes?
Yes, excellent question. We envision those would be the type of situations that we have, and we build a set of questions for the interview, and we were asking what is your current process versus what is your desired process, and we analyzed then the answers, and we were seeing sometimes overlap, sometimes not, so different levels of maturity from process perspective, but you'll definitely have that. It's about how you structure your questions for the interview.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll go to, these are only tools that I will show you what we have used, considering also that we need some more Q&A sessions. So From change management models, I think I wanted to showcase the ones that we looked at from organization perspective when you implement new initiatives. So Cotter and Lewin we have looked at, and from individual perspective, the recognized model that we have in Alberta Services is the ADCAR one. We also build, because we are in healthcare, we build a diagnosis tool. So that really was very helpful for people to understand that if you have this symptom, meaning you go back to your usual type of work, what type of, in what type of state you are, and are you in awareness or desire or whatever, and then we were looking at what type of treatment you need for that, coaching, mentoring, or education and training. So sometimes aligning these tools to the context of the business of the organization matters, because that's the language, stick with that better. Also, the change management models, we apply them at the project level, the project team level. We were a high-touch team, very skilled professional, 10 members from 4 teams. We had to move quickly through the sprint and all that, regular feedback to the steering team, deliver as you go. So that's the nature of the work. And we knew that it was a complex project. So we had to innovate. Everything was urgent. We had the 1 year, and some things were not certain. They were not tested before. So we really had to go through that. I think the part that I wanted to highlight here is that as a high touch team, first time formed, you had to go through that storming before you went to norming. And you had to really look at how you engage and keep the high touch team as well engaged through the process, because there were a lot of ideas, which one you pick. So all of those things that come with project teamwork.
Daniela, Rachel comments that it sounds like very similar to motivational interviewing technique that she uses apparently with counseling clients in terms of the thoughtfulness, in terms of the asking questions and the data gathering.
Yes, thank you. True, right? It's I think there were 3 layers of change management from people perspective. One was you had to be sure that you respond to the sponsor needs. You had to do the change that was happening at the project team level, and the other one was the users, right? The clients. So different type of change management approaches and strategies that we had to use. The other one that I highlighted in those interventions that I was showing before was alignment of knowledge management proven and emerging approaches to the business needs. This is an example of how they were aligned to the business needs of engage, share, collaborate, access, monitor, and so on. What you see here, I would only highlight one thing, and definitely happy to answer any other detailed questions. If you look at the orange, which represents proven approaches that people that were aware about, all the green ones were newly introduced approaches and functionalities in the platform. So this also tells you the level of change management that happened by implementing the platform.
Daniela, can I go back to that for a second? Can I ask you a question? This is a slide that you've used and other things that we've done, and it always fascinates me and just is very, very exciting to see what you and your project team did. Would I be correct in assuming that in making the choice of a number of different emerging approaches, you were looking, you didn't know what was going to work or work well, but you wanted to try a number of different things and not put all your methodological or evaluation eggs in one basket. So you could kind of lay this out this way and then run it, and then basically, like, what do we learn from it? Because that's a common approach in dealing with complexity. Is that similar to the kind of approach that you took?
Yes, that was one of them. The other one was that we translated a lot of the business needs into approaches, knowledge management approaches, and business as well. But we're translating them with terms that are easy for people to understand. So some people were interested to know this thing behind, but some people only wanted to know what type of tools I have for sharing or what type of tools I have for engagement. So depending on the type of questions that we had, we presented what it was, but those initial interviews were essential in translating the needs and then looking at what functionalities can be adapted to really respond to that.
Super, thank you.
Welcome. Important, of course, people are the center of all of this. They are using it, so training, instructional design, and training had to be prepared. We built a path for the knowledge worker and user, and we use microlearning to support that for every component of the platform. For engage, collaborate, manage, and monitor, they could really go and pick the areas that they wanted to learn first. When the platform was ready and they had it available, you cannot learn everything in the same time. So some people were really heavy developer of documents. So then they really looked at how to collaborate to create, review, and approve documents. Some were very project oriented. So then they went into the manage component and so on. So it was an initial training from introduction perspective and all that. And then they could go and learn. There was also a difference in implementation mode with areas, depending on what implementation strategies the departments wanted. We did the training, and then they had the resources available. So different preferences, and we aligned to the user and department preferences as well.
Daniela, Steve had a question, an observation and a question. He says, microlearning has a lot of definitions. How did your effort use it?
I would probably translate it small bites that people had access to for the topic of interest.
And small translates as what? How small is small?
Small is no more than videos. If it was a video, you had a 2 to 4 minutes video. If it was a training bite, because we looked also at different preferences that from learning style perspective, training bites that they could print and they can go step by step, or job aids which were one pager. So depending on what the message was, we try to be very flexible to the learning styles as well.
Super, thank you. We've got about 5 minutes, just as an FYI.
Yeah, and I'm already almost at the end. The last one was really looking at evaluation. We did during project, end of project. We used the ROI methodology with all the levels, the type of output that we wanted to achieve from that, and lessons learned. Selected a few for you. So integration of knowledge management approaches and tools to respond to business needs following, I think it's end user driven design when implementing technologies. That's important. We had to be sure it's easy and attractive for non-technological stuff. We integrate knowledge tools to enhance the user experience and make them feel that they are more efficient and effective in their day-to-day work. The adoption of technology requires definitely a significant cultural change. It reminds me of one of the colleagues that mentioned they flipped a course because of that, and it's true. It's really important all through the entire process. Clear roles and responsibilities once it's in place, very important. What we notice, the support model changed the adoption a lot. Before, people were given only, here are the resources and use them and learn by ourselves. We did do more than that. We continued to support through request log, through education, and updating frequently asked questions. And the last but not the least important, it's about the business value and what's in it for me. Very important to highlight that.
Steve offers a comment. I think your collaborative design approach involving your end users also facilitated overall change management. I suspect they were looking forward to the new system rather than dreading it. Correct.
And they become the ambassadors of the platform, and it's definitely worth the effort to go from the beginning with them, respond to their questions as you build this type of thing. So
super. Other questions or comments? Steve was asking, how many people are on the build team?
10.
10. Okay.
1 year.
And you're in post implementation now, correct?
Yes, we are in post implementation. So since 2017, we implemented in 19 departments. There are around 57,000 users, 75,000 documents. So it's used.
Yeah. Steve kind of comments, wow, you're 10 productive people. And Rachel says, if you could do it again, would you do anything differently?
If probably I have more time, I would pay more attention now that I have the experience in selecting the cross-functional team if I have the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so that's at the start, but I would probably, now that I have an example, I can showcase, for example, benefits and efficiency so that I can demonstrate more the value. I did not have that at the beginning, and I was basing the benefits only from best practice organizations. So what's in it for me, it's very important. Now I have data to build these type of things, but when you start, it's a lot about building trust with your stakeholders. And
yeah. Daniela, if there's one parameter involved in this project, this extraordinary project, that in retrospect, you wish you had given even more attention to because of its leverage and impact on the quality of what you were able to produce? What might that, if that's true, what might that parameter be?
I have to say only one.
It's your show, less than, between 1 and 50, okay?
Between 1 and 50. So I would support people more from two perspectives. One, from supporting the change of behaviors through gamification. So they see the value of their input and content they produce through peer recognition and other ways of showcasing that. From training perspective, we did variations of training and approaches, and I think in retrospect, what it helps is really to have the training done based on each area's business scenario and run their scenario through the platform when they learn. And that requires a different approach and structure of the learning, but it's how you fit your thinking of the day-to-day work into technology. I think help them translate that better.
Okay. I have an evaluation question. If I recall correctly, what you did using the Phillips ROI methodology was taking a look at time savings translated to money. If there was another metric that you could have used or could use the next time to get an even richer sense of what the relative benefit is provided by the intervention, what might that be? What's a usual suspect for you for that?
A different metric. I think it's from web analytics perspective that would show adoption and engagement. And from time savings, the one that I've done was really looking at how much time is saved with the new meeting management solution compared to the previous one.
Yeah.
More of the business part of
right.
fact, probably how quickly you kind of run your project activities compared to your previous way of doing things. So adoption, participation, engagement, and the business part from savings and efficiencies.
Love it. Thank you. Steve, back to you.
Are there any other questions? Wanted to thank you both. I need to agree with Jordy, who's saying, thanks for walking us through a real world project like this, especially a large scale project involving so many different components. Really appreciate this example. And thank you for taking the time to share this with us.
Yeah, I thank you for the opportunity to share. So happy to respond to other questions if they come as afterthoughts or after questions.
Right, and we have access to your slides through the OPWL website. If people want to follow up with you individually, can they email you?
Yes, of course.
And I believe Daniela's email address is on the handout on the bottom left side. So absolutely. Yeah, I've said to Daniela, because I've known her for about as long as this project has been going. And I said to her in the last year as we were working on a paper as well as this. You've got at least a half dozen different papers here. The case study is so darn rich, and there is so much extraordinary stuff going on. It's a gold mine in terms of the kinds of things that that need to be identified and taken into consideration and then worked with. And Daniela, I think, has done, as evidenced by how successful the project is and the acknowledgement from her boss and from others within Canada of how successfully this has played out.
Exactly. I think we're coming to the end of our time. I'd like to thank all of you for being here.
Okay, thank you.
And Daniela, from other folks, from Rachel and from Victor and Kevin and Rick, and thank you 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 very much and thank you and thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Yeah, all of us stay safe.
Okay.
Good night.
Yeah.
Night.
Steve, thanks for the opportunity, guy.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.